Hello again and welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Garrick.
And today's January 20th, when we're taping, because we tape on Tuesdays. You might not be seeing this. If you're watching it on YouTube, you probably are seeing it. I'll be posting to YouTube. I don't even know if she can post to YouTube.
I will be posting to Odyssey,
Awesome.
The uncensored
I was like, I don't even know any of these other things.
I mean,
so I'm like, oh, this is
Well, I know Ron Paul got
Yeah.
banned off everything. You know, a lot of people who are like just legitimate alternative voices
I do
to
have,
things.
I'm not going to say names, but I do have one friend, right, who does post things that you're like, you know, and they make me think, what the heck are you posting that for? Well, they got banned. They got shut down until the 23rd. Apparently, the 23rd seems to be the day that everybody's on, like, in lockdown.
Oh, no, I got
whatever.
locked down
But
till
I
the
think
6th.
it's funny. They commented that I'm in Facebook timeout until the 23rd. And I just joked to myself because there are some people that you're like, gee, I can't imagine what you could have possibly said. I mean, some people just don't think before they, like, some people really are,
Sure,
abrasive
but
and
you know
whatever,
what?
but you don't
Even
need to-
those people should not be censored. We have a constitution in this country that says we have free speech. There is only free speech, and if you don't like someone's ideas or how they're communicating with you, the only thing we do is we counter that with more speech, right? We're in the game of persuasion, conversation.
I'm doing...
You know,
I'm having
so,
a very unique conversation, and conversation is being used broadly in this story, with some of my extended family, because there are some people that I am always interested to try to understand what somebody else's point of view that is different from mine. Like, if you believe that this is happening or X happened or this is to be true, and I think something different, try to make me at least understand where your point is coming from. Or just call me a name and then use vulgarities and profanity against people who are asking you the same questions. Because that's an effective way of convincing people or learning from other people, is definitely calling them names and swearing at them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I find, you know, I was talking to my dad on Sunday, and I find it so interesting, having been raised in a home where, like, we would always talk about issues, like, as you know, it's a debate, everyone around the table. They just will not engage anymore, and I can't figure out if that's sort of a reaction, because I think there's an important thing that we're losing sight of, right? When you criticize a certain system or a certain way that things have been done, I think the people who support that system
take it personally.
Take it very
Too many people are taking
right?
too many things personally.
Well, I think that's by design,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, we just had MLK Day and like the whole thing, right? And you know, and I watched this wonderful, wonderful documentary, which I would love to recommend for everyone back home. I was on a call last week, and actually Colonel Alan West was on the call, and he recommended the movie. It's called Uncle Tom. It is Black voices, so Black conservative voices, you know, all the usual suspects, Candace Owens, you know, Larry Elder, who I had no idea really much about him.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't grow up here, so I think sometimes I like just miss things, right? But really, if you're interested in just a different perspective, or really like, oh, here's a group of people I don't really know much about.
Right.
What I really, really liked about the documentary, and obviously, like, Uncle Tom is an inflammatory name, right? I mean, it's sort of a denigrating name, and everyone in the documentary sort of starts with their story about when someone called them that, right?
Yeah.
So it is very personal, but it was just really, really fascinating to sort of hear in their own voices, people who are, you know, these are mostly conservatives, definitely not libertarian, but, you know, conservative, probably primarily Christian, conservative voices talking, you know, about their journey. And everything is from this note of self-empowerment, and there's a lack of victimhood. You know, they talk about this sort of culture that we've created in America where it's a competition to the lowest common denominator of who's like the biggest victim. And so they really eschew that. So I think it was on Netflix. Highly recommend. I think it got like 9 out of 10 rating currently. And I loved every second of it.
And it's winter, so we have all the time in the world to watch.
So we can hunker down. Yep. Yes. So
it's funny because I said, I brought this to talk about. And Carla said, I didn't see that. And I'm like, this will be fun. So there was an article that bubbled up into my Facebook feed.
Oh, see,
So
because
there you
I
go.
have no idea what's happening in the world, folks.
And this happened to be in the Conway Daily Sun, although I did see that the same story was in the Concord Monitor. But Conway Daily Sun's a legitimate newspaper, and I couldn't help but click on it. So it's only a little article, so I guess I should just read it. This is in Gorham, New Hampshire, and if you don't know where Gorham is, it's just south of Berlin, so a little bit to the east of Lincoln towards the Maine border. Right? Small town, under 3,000 people live there. When out-of-town bird-watching enthusiasts, dressed in camouflage and carrying long-lens cameras, drove into town on Sunday to see flocks of Bohemian waxwings, which apparently is a rare bird for New Hampshire.
Oh, the Bohemian waxwing.
At least one local resident suspected them of being domestic terrorists. Right? There was a New Hampshire Audubon, for those who don't know, have a rare bird sighting thing. And there's a thing in the Sunday paper in the Union Leader that will say, here's all the rare birds.
That.
And they're usually on the seacoast or up north someplace, and somebody, some bird enthusiast sees a Bohemian waxwing, and let's go see the Bohemian waxwing. A Mechanic Street resident saw some folks in camo with long lens cameras walking down the street. She'd seen some trucks with political flags racing up and down Main Street last Wednesday, which now would be, this is the day that the problem in D.C., and put the two together. So she called the police, who came and chatted with the birders.
Oh, my goodness.
So, let me get this straight. Gorham, New Hampshire, way up north in New Hampshire, someone who lives there saw people in camouflage, with long lens cameras, not doing anything out of the ordinary, unless maybe taking pictures or looking through binoculars is that out of the ordinary in the northern part of New Hampshire. But then somehow connected these bird watchers with, now it doesn't even say that the people racing up and down the street were, all we know is they had political flags. I don't know if they were wearing camouflage, and that was somehow... Now, hunters wear camouflage. Lots of people up north, just in their day-to-day lives, wear camouflage. So I was perplexed at one, how do you make these connections in your brain and actually call the police because you think they are domestic terrorists? And two, the police actually responded.
Well, this is part of the fear-mongering, right? It's this part of this idea that we've just scared people into senselessness. I can't think of a better way to describe it.
The Audubon Society, and then this made me even laugh even more because I'm like, no, this shouldn't be. He said he's concerned, however, that misperception has raised fears in more than one resident, and he requests that online sites add birders not to wear camouflage in towns or suburbs.
What?
Given the current tensions, given the current stupidity, I would strongly suggest that birders not wear camouflage and clothing when birding in developed areas. Gorham is now a highly developed area, and I'm sure Mechanic Street in this town of 3,000 people is highly developed, and we should not wear clothing that we're normally wearing because some crazy individual, I'm sorry, made some bizarre correlation between political flags on trucks on the same day that something happened in D.C. has something to do with people in camouflage watching birds.
Well, so
you can't make this up.
I would actually love to sort of timeline all the fear stories over time, right? Because I watch a lot of documentaries. We talk about that. And so you can see over time, like, what are they scaring you with, right? So, COVID's probably run its course. I'm confident after the 20th, it's really going to be a non-issue. Unless, of course, I did also hear that there is now a move to start double masking.
Okay, because
if one's good, two must be better.
We should put them over our ears.
Well, I think some people should probably put them over their eyes.
Maybe we should just put a bubble.
Yes. Honestly, anyway. So you can see over time how there have been these scare tactics,
Yes.
right? So, 9/11, then it became terrorism, then it was international terrorism, then there was like, oh, people aren't scared enough of that, let's throw in some domestic terrorism.
And school
Then it was-
shootings. There was going to be mass shootings.
Then there were the school shootings, and there was the SARS, and there was this, then, and actually with SARS, if you go back and you look now, you're like, oh, they tried,
It didn't.
but it just didn't take, right?
Right.
So then they had to wait a while. So honestly, on my 2021 bingo card,
Well, I got crazy camouflage bird watchers.
I'm down for alien invasion. A false flag, not a real one, but I feel like there's a lot of priming going on for that, and that would just honestly make my 2021. So I guess my point is, when people are trying to scare you, maybe one thing people can try and do when you're like just at home, like when you have this level of anxiety that's just rising up in you, the important thing to do is to stop.
Right.
And to say to yourself, am I in danger right now? Now, typically you'll be sitting in front of your TV
You'll be
having
like,
your heart
"Oh."
race because there's scary music and someone's telling you to get really riled up about something. Switch off your TV, not this show, but switch it off. And then just ask yourself, am I in any danger right now? Like within your real milieu, not what people
Right.
are telling
Right.
you.
Is this really
How
something
is
that I
your
have to be
life?
super concerned about?
And
Am I-
99% of people's lives are not that dangerous, should not be filled with this level of fear. Let's not lose sight, please, also of the fact that in 2021, in the world, this is the best off we as humanity has ever been. Remember that the natural state of humanity is poverty.
Yeah.
So anyone who's not living in poverty, we've already lifted them out of it through free markets and through individual liberty. And don't panic. Do not call the police because you saw someone who's a bird watcher and you've just decided, ooh, I'm going to be
That's scary.
scared of my friends and neighbors and people around you, because that is a very extremely destructive and unhealthy way to live. So
speaking of poverty, so there's at least one bill in the legislature to reinstall a minimum wage in New Hampshire, because we don't have a minimum wage in New Hampshire.
well, it's tied to the federal
It's tied to the
rate.
federal
So
minimum
it's
wage. We
currently
don't actually have our own.
$7.25, right?
This would make it $22.50 an hour. Right. I'm like, you can't make this stuff up.
Well, that's their anchor, because they're
Right.
like, okay, so if
So
it's $7.22.50,
And then
I
there's
see what
talk
they did
that
there.
there'll be a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. And speaking about irrational conversations and trying to understand what people are saying, I had a lengthy conversation. I think it was on Keith Murphy's wall, because Keith said, restaurants are struggling as it is. To bump the minimum wage up to $15 an hour would make the tipped earnings $6.75 an hour, but people make tips above that, so that's misleading. And that where would restaurants ever get? They'd have to get rid of bar backs or bus boy. People would lose jobs. And I had one woman on there who was just going back and forth that she used to make $7.50 an hour as a server plus tips, and it can work. And when I finally got to the point of saying, okay, well, do you believe that people in Berlin, New Hampshire, should be earning the same amount as somebody working in downtown DC? And if so, can that restaurant in Berlin, New Hampshire, charge the same prices as they can in downtown DC? And she kept trying to turn it around. And she said, well, I was in Bedford, Pennsylvania. So I looked up and come to find out, I learned the median house price in Berlin, New Hampshire is $86,000. The median house price in Bedford, Pennsylvania, where she claims things were very similar, is double what it is in Berlin, New Hampshire. And the median house price in DC is $670,000. Those three communities are not the same, nor should a federal law dictate that not only those three communities, but every single community in every single state of this country should all be identical. So people working in rural Tennessee should earn as much as somebody working in Seattle, Washington, or New York City, or Los Angeles, or Dallas.
I saw a fantastic cartoon on this particular subject. So it was let's say it was a fast food place. There was a customer. There were two people behind the counter. So there was a cashier, someone who was maybe making the fries, and the customer. So the customer takes his order, and it's this tiny little hamburger, and he goes, $12 for that tiny hamburger. And the cashier and the person behind the cashier is like, oh, yeah, I got fired today. And the guy who's ringing it up goes, well, I'm making $15 an hour. And I thought there, in a nutshell, is what the issue is. You know, when
it's
people
math.
hear something like, oh, you're against the minimum wage. What you hear is, because you've been trained to hear this, by the way, is, oh my God, you hate poor people. You want everyone to suffer. You're an awful human being. No, what we are is people who actually understand economics. So how does this work? Exactly what Temi just said. If you put up the price, right. nationwide, so you're not, you're not accounting for localism, and then. So now things are equally expensive. So in Berlin, New Hampshire, your hamburger is now become a Gordon Ramsay Las Vegas priced hamburger, $25.99. They're very, very delicious, worth going for. But, like a super expensive hamburger.
You can't sell that on South Willow Street.
Right. I mean, or you can try, but you're going to go
But how is
bankrupt.
that person who even makes $15 an hour going to buy that sandwich? So I did like this. I love spreadsheets. This is because I have to satisfy it in my head that I'm not jumping to some incorrect conclusion. So let's assume $12 an hour. People are making $12 an hour. Because I don't want to go from $7.25 to $15 in math, because people in New Hampshire don't make $7.25 an hour. So let's go from $12 an hour to the $15 that they're talking about at the federal level.
And right before you do that, something that folks back home should understand, that there's very, 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 very few people in America make the actual minimum wage. I think it's less than 0.5.
It's very small.
It's a very
even
small
in poorer
amount.
states.
So the question then also becomes, why are we constantly talking about something that isn't actually an issue?
It's
it's a divisive issue.
Yes.
It's a class war issue. It's all of that stuff, right? It's someone manipulating you again to freak out about stuff that's not actually relevant. Sorry.
So no, go ahead. So to move somebody from $12 an hour to $15 an hour, just not even talking about the increase in cost of goods, costs an employer, for somebody working full time, $130 and change every single week, more. Now let's
in taxes or
no
why?
Over.
Just the pay.
So because you can't just take $3 times 40 and say, well, it's $120, because there's another $10 in taxes, because not only do you pay Medicare and do you pay Social Security, your employer pays just as much on the backside of things. And then they pay the federal unemployment tax, which it is up to it maxes out, I think, at $420 a year. It's 6%, but only on $7,000. And then they pay workers' comp, which I tried to get a specific answer because I really don't remember. And I keep forgetting to look it up at work. Workers' comp is based on your income. So my numbers here are using 1% rate, which is not really what it is. Some job things, it's more like 4%. So every $100, your employer is paying $4. So this number is based on 1%, which is very, very conservative. But imagine an ice cream stand where kids are making $12 an hour to scoop ice cream, right? And say you have 10 employees, or the equivalent of 10 employees that are working.
I want to go to that ice cream stand.
Working for 40 hours a week. If you increase the minimum wage from $12 to $15, we're talking about $1,300 a month that employer has to now pay.
But where are they supposed to? But the rich capitalist pigs can just afford it, Tammy.
Right, but do people really think that restaurant owners and ice cream stand owners and small retail shops and insurance agencies and pretty much every business owner under the sun is just rolling in money that they don't know what to do with?
Yes, that's exactly what everyone believes. They do.
That's what's crazy. Keith Murphy was talking the other day, and he had a really good point in this conversation about tips versus base salary and whatnot. And he said, hey, look, last night I worked at the restaurant. He must have been the bartender. He goes, I don't pay myself an hourly rate. He goes, I made over $29 an hour in tips. Why are we complaining about how much servers are making? Because they're only technically making $3.27 an hour in data, when they're actually making $29 an hour. He's like, how about this as
$29 an hour during COVID when everyone's on restricted hours. I mean,
it just people,
good waiters and waitresses
can make good money.
And if you're doing it right and it's in cash,
Yep. And which is ironic because I think the IRS comes up with a number that you made in tips, whether not based on what you tell them, but based on a percentage of the sales of the restaurant. So I think Keith ends up having to pay Social Security and Medicare and workers' comp. I might have to pay it on your tips. It's insane. Basically, it all sounds good to say, oh, everybody should make $22.50 an hour, or oh, everybody should make $15 an hour. It sounds good on paper, and in reality, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And here's a question maybe people should grapple with is, oh, if it's the fat capitalist pigs, the business owners, and they're exploiting their workers and like all the nonsense we hear, right? It's like, why did at least 30 Manchester, New Hampshire restaurants
go out of
business?
If
they're so rich, why can't they just? That's one question you need to ask yourself. The second question you should ask yourself, if we're just going to make up magical numbers of what people should get paid without any sense of the actual economics of it, let's make the minimum wage $1,000 an hour. Why not?
I don't know. I don't know.
And that is a question, and the answer is out there. So I highly recommend people go.
Just try to have conversations, because this is something that when I was in the legislature and I served on the labor committee, I actually did research on how many people make minimum wage, because I thought, geez, maybe I'm buying into some rhetoric that nobody makes minimum wage, but we did the numbers. There's no way to actually get you can't count, but you can get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and from the Department of Labor, you can get a fairly good idea. And back then, now we're talking 6 years ago, back then, if there was 3,000 people in the entire state of New Hampshire, including kids who are working part-time summer jobs, doing scooping ice cream, we would have been surprised. So when you talk about these things, and when state reps I'd love to go and listen to this.
And let's just be fair and equitable. I'm just going to throw all the words out here today. So if there are 3,000 people in New Hampshire who make minimum wage, and we have to talk about it all the friggin' time, then let's say, I don't know, weren't there like, how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people voted for Ron Paul in the primary?
A lot.
He came second on both the tickets. So let's say it was a few hundred thousand, right? So I actually sent this email to NHPR once when they were talking about the minimum wage. And I was like, how about this? For every time any publicly sourced place, and I would include all our news agencies at this stage because they're all part of Pravda, every time they talk about the minimum wage, in order to be fair and equitable, they have to talk about free market economics as well. Because
it's the same discussion, but we don't want to talk about that side.
Right, because
we don't want to talk about the business economics. We don't want to talk about how it can work on its own or how it is working on its own. We only want to talk about I feel bad because
that's exploitative, right?
They're
where you
exploiting
can pick people.
Right. They are totally exploiting lower income people by telling them that this is going to improve their life, when the reality is when that hamburger is this big, or this hamburger
or
is
that guy
$10
lost his
more,
job,
or somebody's out of work completely and isn't getting $600 a week bonus money from the federal government. The reality will then set in that oh, wait, I ask people all the time who aren't making $15 an hour, do they think their lives would get better if they made the minimum $15 an hour? And they say no, because they can do math.
Well, more money is always going to be,
we don't know what we knocked over down there.
Obviously the more money you have, probably, it doesn't buy happiness, it does make life easier. It will make things more comfortable or easier. I'm willing to grant that. But there's the seen and the unseen, and we are in this paradigm right now where people are only talking about one side of each equation. We've said this from the start. I said it back in February, March last year. I'm like, you could be concerned about several things. Nothing is that binary. It's not like masks or no masks, or it's mandate or no mandate, right? It's like this idea of it's this or this is so wrong. It is how they are separating normal human beings from being neighborly, right? Like, we're living in this
people are really
binary struggle that is not the human condition.
And it's not good for people. It's not good for communities. It's just not good for, like you said, neighborliness. People people are just so angry. And I don't, like people, this is the argument. You've got half of the country going, well, they're angry because of Donald Trump. And I'm like, one man can make a half of a country angry? That's amazing.
Well, it can if you have all the media working to do that one thing. I mean, that's all that
then you've got the other half saying, they're angry because you're saying they're angry, and it's just...
Oh, this goes back to, we were talking last week after the show, and we said, I have this theory where I think the AI, so there are all these algorithms, and I actually think they're becoming sentient, and part of this partisan left-right thing is actually, I think the AI escaped.
Well,
and it's out there because...
I do think when we were talking about it as far as social media and like why certain people are getting their Facebook posts shut down and like when they aren't actually... there are some people who...
Look, I have never posted something that deserves to get kicked off.
And
of
Victoria
anything.
couldn't post in a homeschool group. That, like, okay, how? But you did have a really good point. So, like, what if all the algorithms are more than just an algorithm, and we've now attached them to an AI who the AI adjusts the algorithm to meet the needs, but then the AI, all it takes is the AI to not be able to think it through in human sense, and then now they're deleting people.
Well, two things. One is,
so
I don't know.
We sound crazy.
I don't know. I don't know if you remember this, but it was probably 4 years ago or so. I mean, it was a while ago. There was an experiment where they wrote an AI algorithm that was supposed to do, I think it was like almost machine learning off Twitter. So there was this algorithm that was just going to read Twitter, and then it was going to be like tweet on its own. Within 2 days, that Twitter account for the AI thing was a raving, racist, neo-Nazi, insane person. And I was like, wow. So you've got to imagine that there's stuff going on.
Dan,
and we know the machine learning.
We're going to run out of time, but Dan showed me a thing on TV on the screen the other day. It was an AI that is taught to be able to create a graphic.
Yep.
Oh my God, the things you could say anything. You'd be like, I want to see a giraffe milkshake. And they'd show you, and it would generate a picture of a giraffe milkshake. And you're like, oh, how is it doing that? It is a little concerning.
Yeah, it is. We're going to run out of time. We didn't get to talk about right to know at all.
And legislative policy and see if
process. We're going to be testing it today. Carla, me signed up to support some bills and to oppose some bills regarding transparency and open government. These are Senate bills. I signed up to see how the process would work with like Zoom and how we're going to testify, how it works if it's remote and all of that. So I will report back.
I think we talk about that next week completely.
Buy my book, Ecstatic Pessimist. It's on Amazon and on my website, carlagerrick.com.
Stay warm. It's not going to snow for another 10 days. What's up with that? It's almost February.
I'm actually missing the snow.
I know. I would like it a little bit, but I'm not complaining because you're all safe because we paid for a season full of snow plowing. So it's not going to snow this year. Anyways, that's all we got. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.